I used to think loyalty was simple. You take an oath, you wear the uniform, and you do what you're told. But that was before Commander Adrian Hale called my name. The camp sat somewhere between dust and silence, the kind of place where days blurred together. Each morning began with the whistle, the march, the heat, and the aching distance between me and my husband, Daniel. We hadn't seen each other in 8 months. Messages took weeks, and phone calls were rationed like oxygen. Sometimes I'd reread his old letters under the faint yellow light of my bunk lamp, reminders of a life that felt like another lifetime. I told myself this loneliness was temporary, that I could carry it. That's what soldiers do. They carry things. But that afternoon, everything shifted. We were lined up in the training field when Commander Hale appeared. His voice, deep and controlled, rolled across the line like thunder. He announced a personal inspection, unplanned and unusually strict. Each man was to report to his office, one at a time, no exceptions. It wasn't the order itself that caught my attention. It was his eyes when they met mine. They lingered for just a second too long, calm, unreadable, but weighted with something I couldn't name. When the others were dismissed, my stomach knotted. My name was called last. The commander's office was silent except for the ticking of a small clock. Papers neatly stacked, a single cup of coffee untouched. He didn't look up when I entered. "Close the door, Sergeant Cole," he said. I obeyed. The air felt heavier behind that door. He rose slowly, adjusting his sleeves, then turned to me. "We've had reports of soldiers hiding items in unauthorized places. I'll need to check you myself." His tone was steady, official, but the words still sent a strange current through me. "Sir?" I asked, unsure if I'd heard him right. "Remove your shirt." "This won't take long," my breath caught. This wasn't standard procedure, but his authority left no room for refusal. With a nod, I began unbuttoning, one slow motion at a time. The silence between us grew thicker. My pulse thudded in my ears. Hale's eyes followed every movement, not hungrily, but intently, as if studying something beyond the surface. When I stood there, exposed from the waist up, he stepped closer, inspecting my arms, my shoulders, my back. His voice softened. "You've been pushing yourself harder than the rest. I'm fine, sir. Are you?" he asked almost quietly. For the first time, his tone wasn't that of a superior officer. It was that of a man who saw through the armor I wore. I didn't answer. Couldn't. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of soap and coffee on his skin. For a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk to the sound of two people breathing in the same small space. Then just as suddenly, he stepped back. "That'll be all, Sergeant." I dressed in silence, unsure what had just happened, or why it felt like something had. Before I left, he said, "You carry too much weight. Cole, learn to let some of it go." His voice lingered long after I closed the door. That night, I lay awake in my bunk, staring at the ceiling fan's slow rotation. The other soldiers slept soundly, their breaths steady and rhythmic. I replayed the scene over and over, searching for logic in what had felt anything but procedural. It wasn't the inspection that unsettled me. It was how I'd felt under his gaze. Seen. Known. Not as a soldier. Not even as a man under command, but as someone he understood without needing words. I hated that part of me didn't want to forget it. I tried writing to Daniel. "Camp's fine," I wrote. "Work's routine." But the pen hesitated every few words, as if the truth would bleed through if I pressed too hard. I folded the letter half-written and tucked it away. Outside, thunder cracked in the distance, rolling over the hills. Rain began to fall against the tin roof, soft and steady. Somewhere in that rhythm, I thought I heard Hale's voice again. Calm, restrained, carrying a weight of his own. I told myself it was nothing. That it was just an inspection, but I couldn't stop feeling like it had been something else, a question neither of us was brave enough to ask. The morning after that inspection, I tried to convince myself nothing had changed. But the air around Commander Hale felt different, heavier somehow, as if something invisible lingered between us. During drills, I caught him watching me. Not often, not obviously, but enough that my chest would tighten each time our eyes met. He never said a word about what happened. Neither did I. Still, every silence between us spoke louder than any order could. A week later, he summoned me again. His office looked exactly the same, tidy, distant, composed. But this time the tone was softer. "Close the door, Sergeant," he said again, though it didn't sound like an order now. He gestured for me to sit. For a while, neither of us spoke. The clock on his desk ticked between us like a heartbeat. Finally, he broke the silence. "You've been distracted lately." I hesitated. "Just tired, sir?" "Don't lie to me, Cole. You think too much. You carry it on your face." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "When I first joined the Army, I thought discipline meant silence. Turns out silence just teaches you how to hide better." His words hit something raw inside me. Maybe because I'd been doing the same, hiding behind duty, behind the promise I made to Daniel, behind the person I was supposed to be. He stood, moved to the window, and said quietly, "Do you ever miss the version of yourself before all this?" I didn't know what to say. The question was too personal, too honest. I managed a faint smile. "Every day, sir." He nodded, still facing the rain-streaked glass. "Then maybe we're both still looking for who we used to be." There was no rank in his voice then, no commander, no soldier. Just two men sitting in the ruins of who they'd once been. That night, a storm hit camp. The power flickered, thunder echoing through the corridors. Most of the soldiers gathered in the mess hall to wait it out, laughing and drinking. I stayed behind, pretending to clean gear. But really, I was avoiding something I didn't understand. When I finally stepped outside, the rain had softened. The commander was standing under the canopy near the training yard, coat unbuttoned, hair damp. He turned when he heard me approach. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head. "Too loud." He gave a small, knowing smile. "Yeah, it gets inside you after a while. The noise." We stood there for a while, saying nothing. Just the sound of rain on tin and the faint hum of generators. He offered me his flask, whiskey. I hesitated but took it. The burn was sharp, grounding. When I handed it back, our fingers brushed, just a second of contact. But it felt like the world slowed down around it. Something unspoken cracked open between us then. He didn't step closer. Neither did I. But the silence filled with everything words couldn't say. Loneliness, need, confusion, something dangerously close to tenderness. He looked at me, eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "You're a good man, Cole. That's what makes this harder." I didn't ask what this meant. I already knew. The rain fell harder, blurring the edges of everything. The yard, the barracks, even the space between us. For a moment I thought he might reach for me. But instead he stepped back, clearing his throat. "You should get some rest." I nodded, unable to speak. As I walked away, the sound of my boots splashing through puddles mixed with the echo of his voice in my mind. "You're a good man, Cole." The words felt like both a warning and a confession. Back in my bunk, I tried to write again. The letter to Daniel had sat unfinished for days. I picked up the pen, but every word felt false. How could I tell him about something I didn't understand myself? I wasn't unfaithful, not in the way people define it, but emotionally I was already straying. I was thinking about another man's voice, another man's silence. I closed my eyes and imagined Daniel's face, warm, kind, patient. He deserved better than this confusion inside me. Yet when I drifted to sleep, it wasn't Daniel I dreamed of. It was Hale, standing in the rain, eyes full of something I shouldn't have seen. The next day, I avoided him. But avoidance doesn't erase connection. It only sharpens it. During training, he corrected my posture, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder. Firm but careful, like he was testing a boundary neither of us knew how to name. The others probably thought nothing of it. But I felt everything. That evening, when the sun dipped behind the hills, I found myself standing by the fence line, staring into the horizon. For the first time in months, I felt alive. Not happy, not free, but alive. And with that came guilt so sharp it nearly stole my breath, because I wasn't supposed to feel this. Not for him. Not here, but feelings don't care about vows or uniforms. They bloom in silence, in glances, in the spaces between words, and by the time you realize it's happening, it's already too late. Some weeks passed. The air between me and Commander Hale had cooled, at least on the surface. We still worked together, drills, reports, mission prep, everything by the book. But there were moments, brief and unguarded, when his voice softened, or his gaze lingered too long. And every time it did, something inside me stirred that I didn't want to name. Then came the mission. It was supposed to be routine, a night patrol near the border. 4 men, 2 vehicles, clear weather. Nothing unusual, but routine can change faster than breath. We were halfway through when the first explosion hit. Dust swallowed the headlights. Shouting, gunfire, chaos. I remember falling, my shoulder slamming against the ground. Then silence, and Hale's voice low but steady. Cole, stay with me! When I opened my eyes, he was crouched beside me, his hand pressed over a gash on my arm. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. But his eyes, they were clear, steady, human. He stayed with me until the medics came. And when I was finally pulled onto the evac truck, he just nodded once, as if to say, you're safe now. No salute, no words. Just a look that carried everything we'd left unsaid. Days later, back at base, I found myself outside his office again. The same clock ticking, the same quiet. He looked tired, more than usual. How's the arm? He asked. Better, I said. Then silence. Heavy, thick, honest silence. He stood, walked to the desk, and rested his hands on it. I shouldn't have called you in that night. The inspection. It wasn't regulation. I told myself it was for discipline, but it wasn't. My heart pounded. Then why did you? He met my eyes. For once he didn't hide. Because I needed to see you. I needed a reason to break my own rules. And I'm sorry for that. There it was. The truth neither of us had dared to speak. And hearing it didn't feel like relief. It felt like standing at the edge of something beautiful and dangerous, knowing one more step would ruin everything. I swallowed hard. You didn't do anything wrong. He shook his head. Didn't I? I'm your superior, Ethan. And I let my loneliness turn into something it shouldn't have. The sound of my first name in his mouth nearly undid me. I took a slow breath. You're not the only one who felt it. For a moment, the world went still. Then quietly, he said, I know. He stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough that I could feel his warmth. I think about you more than I should, he admitted, voice trembling at the edges. But we both know what happens if we cross that line. I nodded. My throat felt tight. Then maybe not crossing it is the only way to keep it real. He gave a faint, broken smile. You always did understand things better than I did. And then, he did something unexpected. He reached out and placed a small folded paper in my hand. Don't open it now, he said. When you're ready. A week later, Hale was gone. Transferred to another division up north. No explanation, no goodbye. Just silence. When the convoy left, I stood by the gates, the folded paper still in my pocket. I didn't open it until that night. It wasn't long, just a few lines written in sharp, deliberate strokes. Some connections don't need a name. Some bonds are meant to stay hidden between duty and desire. Thank you for reminding me I'm still human. AHI read it over and over, until the ink blurred under my thumb. Months later, when I finally returned home, Daniel was waiting at the airport. He smiled when he saw me, that same gentle smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. I hugged him longer than usual, breathing in the scent of home, warmth, forgiveness. That night, sitting together in our kitchen, he asked quietly, Was it hard out there? I hesitated. Harder than I expected, he nodded. Did you ever feel lost? The question hit deeper than he knew. I looked at him. The man who'd waited, written, worried, and realized I couldn't keep pretending. I almost made a mistake, I said softly. Not a physical one, but I cared for someone I shouldn't have. He didn't look shocked. He just reached across the table, his hand covering mine. You came back, he said simply. That's what matters. Tears stung my eyes. I don't deserve that kind of grace, he smiled faintly. Maybe not, but love isn't about deserving. Later, when Daniel fell asleep, I sat by the window, holding 2 letters, One from him, one from Hale. Two worlds that could never meet. The moonlight fell across the paper, and I thought about all the lines we draw in life, between duty and desire, truth and silence, love and loyalty. I'd crossed none of them completely, but I'd stood close enough to see how easily they blur. In the end, I learned something simple. Infidelity doesn't always begin with a touch. Sometimes it begins with a heartbeat that answers another when it shouldn't. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop before it's too late.